Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's DealerOn webinar. Get more bang for your buck from your employee training. My name is Eliana Raggio and I'll be your moderator today. And today's webinar is being presented by DealerOn. For anyone who isn't familiar with DealerOn, well, we're an award-winning website development company and digital agency, best known for our amazing SEO, the absolute best customer service, and the highest converting website designs in the industry, including the brand new Chameleon responsive website platform. We're so committed to lead conversion, optimization, and customer service that DealerOn is still the only company in the industry that offers a money-back lead guarantee program. Does your website company guarantee you a 50% lift in leads or your money back? Well, maybe you should check us out at our gorgeous brand new DealerOn website at DealerOn.com. And by the way, I am going to be emceeing the upcoming Women in Automotive Conference. It's the first of its kind. The event will be August 18th through the 20th in Orlando, Florida. It's going to be focused on aiding and empowering the women in our industry to improve their skills, advance their careers, and find the highest level of success in our male-dominated industry. So if you want to make your way to Orlando next week, I'd love to see you. And to find out more about the Women in Automotive Conference, please visit womeninautomotive.com, or you can check out #WomenInAutomotive. Hope to see you there. And we have a great show in store for you today. We're very pleased to have the one and only Glenn Pasch as our presenter today. Glenn is CEO and partner of PCG Digital Marketing and PCG Consulting. He's also a speaker, writer, coach, and operations strategist, as well as a customer service fanatic. A trainer at heart, Glenn works with executive management and internal teams to develop new strategies around digital marketing initiatives that will enable businesses to achieve their desired objectives and priorities. Glenn has more than 25 years of experience with a proven track record of leading diverse teams of professionals to new levels of achievement in a variety of highly competitive markets and fast-paced environments. Glenn speaks on a variety of topics that cover business leadership, change management, digital marketing, and the impact of this new technology on culture, business, and society. He writes for multiple industry publications, and his articles can easily be found online. Glenn can be reached at glenn@pcgmailer.com. Now, during the presentation, if you have any questions, please use the question feature located on the corner of your screen to submit them. At the end of the presentation, we'll answer those questions of general interest. If we're unable to get to your question live, don't worry, we're going to try to respond to you by email later today. Also, don't forget, a link to download a copy of this webinar recording is going to be emailed to you later today. Feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. Oh, and guess what? Our good friends at PCG Consulting, they are giving away a tremendous prize on today's webinar. 3 of you lucky webinar attendees are going to win free access for 90 days to 2 of PCG's valuable online courses, Fundamentals of Digital Marketing and Web Presence Management. Now, I got to tell you, I took a look at it because Glenn was kind enough to show this to me. The level of hands-on, step-by-step training awesomeness of these modules, it cannot be understated. This is a tremendous prize for you and your dealership. You have to be on the live broadcast to win it, though. So stay tuned, and you could be winning one of these awesome prizes today. Also, at the conclusion of the webinar, you're going to receive a short survey, so fill it out. We're always looking for great feedback from our audience. Today, we're going to randomly select a couple of people from all the completed surveys to also win some Google prizes. And hey, do you tweet much? You know what? We hope you do. We'd love to see what you have to say about today's presentation, so please tag us in it. You can use #DealerOnWebby, or I'm at Eliana Raggio. You can also hit up Glenn Pasch at Glenn Pasch. We look forward to seeing what you're saying. Now let's get started. Let's learn how to get more bang for your buck from your employee training. Glenn, or as I like to call you, you know, I always call you G Money. G, how you doing?
I am doing fantastic. How is everyone today?
Oh, well, let me just tell you.
Okay.
I got to tell you, it's been way too long since you and I have webinared together, so I'm so glad to have you back on the show. And this topic that you picked, this is great because you're not just talking about training. You're talking about how to make it count and make it stick, right?
Yeah, what I see a lot as I travel around, so people sometimes get a little confused in terms of what does PCG do, because we do have our full service agency, but we also go into dealerships and help them with their processes. So a lot of times dealers have a lot of vendors and they go, how do I make all of this work that I'm receiving from all these vendors, how do I make it more effective, and more importantly, how do I get my people more involved? And if I'm spending money on training, it just seems like I'm constantly spending money and repeating myself and nothing's sticking. Can you help me? And so I thought this was a valuable topic to talk about, because I'm going to give you some very simple things that you can do to prepare correctly for training, and then more importantly, once the training's done, how to really make it effective so that you get a good return on your investment.
Oh, it's so important. And I know you have a jam-packed presentation ready for us, so please take it away. Where do we begin?
Well, let's talk about a couple things we want to knock out today in this next 45 minutes, hour, whatever time Eliana will let me rattle on.
How long I'm going to let you?
So, yeah, before I get started, I did find out a few minutes ago today is National Left-Handers Day. I am a left-hander, so to all my fellow left-handers out there, have a great day. So,
after this webinar, you can completely take the rest of the day off on me, really.
Yeah, go tell your boss that.
You're welcome.
So a couple things I want to talk about is, of course, we have to talk initially about the problems with training today. What are the things that I see? And I'm going to be asking you a little bit as well for the participants, even during, I'd like your feedback so that I can really tailor this webinar to things that you want to find out. I want to talk about what makes a great trainer, not just someone you bring in from the outside. So when I say trainer, yes, there are people that are brought in either from the manufacturer or one of your vendors who's coming in to do training, or sometimes you have someone internally who's going to be coaching and training. And what makes a good trainer? Maybe some of you who are on this are responsible for coaching, training, leading a team. Give you a couple tips on what I think is a good trainer and what I look for when I coach and develop trainers. Again, how to make the training stick. And then also, what's the best education? I'm constantly asked by people, well, everyone says I should self-educate, I should learn. Where can I find a great answer, great education? And then lastly, we will have a Q&A session, but again, I work a little differently, so I'm going to use Eliana as well as a helper here, is that as I ask questions, or if you have something that I'm talking about and you think it's relevant, I will stop and ask you for some feedback. As I said, I want to make sure you walk out of here with questions answered. I don't want you walking out of here going, well, that was a great webinar, now what do I do with this? So my first question to everyone here is, why are you here? Meaning that out of all the webinars that DealerOn does, and they do a fantastic job about providing great education.
Thank you.
And that's not just because you're here, but I say that a lot. You guys are the only ones out there that are consistently doing this, and it's a great thing. But why did you choose this topic? What are you trying to get? So tell me out there, why are you trainers? Are you frustrated with training? Are you managers who are getting training, and you're trying to figure out why? Why are you here? If you can just type in any quick responses that Eliana can read to me so I can see, so that this way, like I said, this way I can tailor some of my comments to maybe some of your issues or questions that you have as we go through this. So why are you here? Why are you sitting here listening to me, taking time out of your day? What are you looking to get out of this? What do we see, Eliana?
Okay, so Tim wrote in, I'm a trainer wanting to get the training to stick. Thank you, Tim. Ashton wrote in, I want more ROI. I think we all understand that. Susan said, education is important. Jason says, I conduct a lot of CRM and tech training for my auto group. Ugh, CRM training? Oof, that's tough. David said, I'm here because it's Thursday and I always spend my Thursdays with Eliana. Thank you, David. Kevin said, I want to build a better training program. Excellent answer, Kevin. And Amber says, I want to learn better ways to train and help my customers.
Okay,
Excellent
great.
answers, everyone. Thank you.
Great. So those are good choices. So again, that's really good. So we'll talk, Tim, you're a trainer. How do you want to get these things to stick? Ashton, more ROI. And again, we'll talk a little bit about that wording ROI sometimes, because when we get to the point about measuring, then it's deciding, well, what does that mean? Because ROI can mean a variety of things to a lot of people. Education, CRM, and I know, I think was it Jason who does the CRM? He talked about CRM.
Oh, let's see. Yes, it was.
Okay, great. I couldn't read my handwriting right there for a moment. But anybody, listen, any training that you're doing, it doesn't matter what the topic is. I'm going to give you a framework of things that I do. And as I said, we're going to talk about where issues I see happening. And if they resonate with you, mark them down. If some of these things are happening, well, we have to change some, and as I said, I'm going to show you things that you can do to change. So if you think about the cost of doing business, and what I mean by cost of doing business, there's two things. One is there was a statistic, and keep this statistic in your write this down because we may refer to it later on, is that set on average 2013 into 2014, corporate employee training was over $70 billion, and the previous years, it was increasing 10% each year. That's a lot of money. So if you just now take that to your own dealership and say to yourself, how much money is spent on training? Either, as I said, manufacturers creating documents and passing them out and sending them to you about new products, new vehicles, new services. Maybe you have whoever is your CRM company or your website company, or they come in and they help you with an install and help you with training. Maybe there's a sales trainer that comes in. Maybe there's a service advisor trainer coming in. Tech training, tons and tons of things that are brought in, let alone your own internal training, meaning what training happens inside of your own business. When you think of all that money, and to Jason's point, to Ashton's point, how do I make sure that I'm getting the bang for the buck? Meaning that if I'm going to invest in the training, how do I know it's working? How can I measure what's going on? What do I measure the change? So if I, for instance, I bring in a sales trainer or I bring in a trainer to help my BDC, well, how do I know it worked? And how do I know that it's going to stick? And we're going to talk about that because there's really three stages. It's before the trainer gets there, it's during the trainer, and then it's after the trainer. And what we want to focus on is all of these things to empower you with a little bit of a checklist and so that you can leave this, go back to your dealership and say, okay, let's fix some of this that's going on out here. So why does training fail? And as I said, don't be afraid to post comments for Eliana and myself as I'm talking about this. If this resonates with you and you say, yeah, this happens, or this happened in my dealership, or this is one of my concerns, let this be a dialogue. And Eliana, if you see anything that attracts your eye and stands out, just let's talk about it.
Yes, sir.
So let's talk about why I think training fails. To a lot of your guys talking about, Tim, I want it to stick. Amber, I want to help my customers. Kevin, I want to build a better training process. Well, first we have to look at it and be honest with ourselves and say, why does most training fail? And really, these are 5 things that you need to focus on. I highlighted the one that I think is really the most important one, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But I think number 1 is lack of preparation. I don't think people prepare well enough ahead of time for training. And each of these 5, we will go in depth and in detail as we move through this presentation about what I mean by lack of preparation and then how can you prepare. So as I said, we'll go through each one. But I don't think people prepare enough. I mean, how many times, again, for the audience out there, how many times do you walk in and all of a sudden someone says, oh, the trainer's here, and you go, what trainer? For what? Why are they here? Now, either you're supposed to be in training or somebody's having training sent in for your team and nobody talked to you, your team's not ready, no one understands it, but there's that trainer, and how focused really is your team going to be if they weren't prepared for this training. Number two is lack of involvement. Now, that can be lack of involvement of the team because they weren't prepared, they weren't ready, they didn't know that this was going on. But one of the things that I see in terms of lack of involvement and why training fails is upper management is usually not involved, or even some of the managers of the teams. Again, I've seen it happen. I did it. I did a training. Someone brought me in to train their sales team. So I came in to train their sales team and go over a few things. They were talking about how to use social media, better use a CRM, what is the new digital customer, we're talking all about this, except the upper management, the GSM, and the team leader, they weren't there. They weren't sitting in the training. And I thought that was really interesting because it didn't set the right tone. Plus, they came in and took people out of the training to have conversations. So what they did right there was they set up the fact that this training really wasn't important. It was, again, checking it off. So if they're not involved, how important, what type of message are you sending? So think again. How many times have you had training that the manager of your team isn't there, the person who's going to oversee this team or oversee this change or oversee this department, they're not even in the building, except you've just been sent to go do training. That to me, flat out, is the biggest failure, because then that person doesn't know what was talked about in the training, doesn't understand what was communicated, what should happen, and it'll cause frustration in the long run, let alone, as I said, it sets a very poor example that this training is not important. The third one is lack of implementation. What happens is great training, nothing gets implemented. Nobody takes the time to go look at how should this training be implemented, what happens after it. Think about, maybe some of you have gone to a live conference. You go to a conference and you go sit through a great workshop and you have great information, but then you walk out and go, well, now what do I do with this information? How do I do this? Or, again, some trainer comes in, pumps you all up, yeah, we're going to go do this, and then you walk out and you go, what do I do? So, I mean, I've seen it. I'll give you an example. I was sitting in a dealership talking, working with their team. They wanted to, every morning they watched, there's a certain couple sales trainers out there who have, training platforms. Well, they were watching one of these platforms, and they were watching one of the modules. The module was fantastic, except at the end of this module, when they went through all the questions, the GSM was just going through the questions, and I noticed out of the 12 people that were there, 2 people were answering most of the questions. But it didn't seem like that GSM had any desire to get everyone involved. It was more, let's just get through this. And at the end of it, he said, okay, guys, great information. Let's go use that. Let's go sell cars. But there was nothing over the next couple days. Every morning they'd watch a video, but there was no follow-up training to say, okay, how are we going to implement that? Or even checking up, which leads me to point number 4, how to follow up. Nobody was going out to actually see if these salespeople were using any of that information, that new skill that they were talking about. I believe it was talking about how to overcome objections or how to transition from one point to another. Nobody was going out to watch if these salespeople were doing it. It was just if the general manager came to the GSM and said, are you using this training platform? Oh, yes, I am. Look, we're doing all these modules. But yet nobody was really implementing it and then following up to see if they were using it. And then lastly, to, again, Ashton's point, more ROI, well, how are they measuring this? So it goes back to preparation. If we're starting somewhere, what were our metrics before the trainer came in or this new initiative was implemented? And then afterwards, did the metrics change? Over what time period? For how long? Many times training just happens, but nobody even knows what we're measuring. So, of course, well, that trainer wasn't effective. Well, how do you know? Well, it just doesn't seem like the people really got anything out of it. Well, are you measuring anything? Well, you know, we're just not selling any more cars. Well, was that the point of the trainer here? What was the trainer doing? So again, all of this ties into why training fails. And for especially Kevin, when you're saying I want to build a better process, these things are really key for you and for anyone here. You know, Jason, you're doing your CRM training. All of this, how are you preparing the team that you're going to go in and do some work before you even get there? How are you getting the right involvement? What happens afterwards? How are you following up? What are you measuring? All of these things are going to lead you to be successful and get away from this lack of training.
Now,
So
Susan, I was going to say, Susan wrote in, she noticed on your list you didn't have lack of accountability. So she threw that one in there.
Well, that to me goes follow-up and with measurement. And again, right, you can put it there, but you know, as a trainer, you're following up. Part of the follow-up process is getting people on track. So yes, Susan, I agree with you in terms of accountability, but that goes to me for follow-up, and I should clarify that, so thank you for pointing that out. When I say follow-up, my point is I go out, so if you're supposed to be doing X, Y, and Z, I'm going to follow up and make sure you're doing X, Y, and Z. If for some reason you're not doing X, Y, and Z, my job as a trainer is to get you back on track. If you've trained me correctly, and if you were doing what you're supposed to be doing, and for some reason, as most times it happens, the first couple times that you follow up, you start to drift off, go back to old habits. It's your job to get them back on track through following up, and that's part of the accountability. And that is, to me, follow-up in my mind is accountability. Are we holding people accountable to the new metrics, to the new process, to the new measurement? So again, that's part of what I mean by follow-up. So thank you, Susan.
Yes, we also had David who wrote in, well, taking them out of the meeting defeats the purpose. And then David wrote in, I think another reason that training fails is that you have folks who've been in the car biz for such a long time who seem to, quote unquote, know everything, that they become a sort of a cancer to the whole training process and kind of impede on new ideas and new strategies. And then
so let me just answer that. That's a great point. That was David?
Yes.
Okay, David, great point. What happens when you have some people, and we all know them, they're the old dogs or whatever, or even just, they don't even have to quote unquote be the old dogs. Some people just don't want to change. I've dealt with young salespeople who are successful, and they're basically going, hey, nobody can teach me anything. That's where the preparation comes. Combination, if you're coming in as a trainer, if you're going into a store or dealership and you don't really know the dynamics, well, that's a question that you should be asking whoever brought you in. So again, going back to preparation, if I'm a trainer coming into your dealership and the general manager talked to me and said, Glenn, I want you to come in, my first question is, tell me about the team I'm working with. Give me the dynamic. Who's in charge? How long have they been in charge? Can I see results? You know, if I'm going to be improving their, for instance, their sales skills or their CRM usage, I'm going to say, let me go back here, where is your measurement? What reports were you doing? How are you holding, to Susan's point, how are you holding them accountable? Were you holding them accountable? Who are your people who are going to listen to me? Who are the people that are going to give me problems? Who are the people that I'm going to have to win over? And that's part of being a good trainer. We'll talk about later on in terms of some of the skills of a trainer, but you've got to be a salesperson. You have to find a way to win them over. Now, if you have some people who are just going to be disruptive, well, that's a conversation with the person who brought you in or the manager above you to say, hey, listen, every day, Bob or Mary or whatever their name is, they just sit in the back and roll their eyes. They're being disruptive. I prefer if they weren't in my training because they're not. Or this is your job, general manager. You need to take care of this because this is not helping. And it's sometimes easier for someone who's coming in from the outside to have that conversation. I'm going to tell you because internally it can be a little touchy, but you have to pull that person aside and have a conversation and saying, why are you fighting me? Why are you fighting me on this? And in the very end of this, I give you some resources. There's a great book. It was one of the best books I ever read.
Hold on to it. Hold on to it till we get there.
I know. So what I'm going to say is that it explains how to deal with people like that. So it's a little teaser for you.
Okay, all right.
Okay, give me your poll question.
All right, audience, we have 3 poll questions for you today. The first one is on your screen now, and it is, how often do you currently receive training in 1 month? Please select one of the following answers. Is it none, really, very little? It depends on if we have a new initiative, weekly, or every darn day. How often do you currently receive training in a typical month? You don't really get a lot. You get very, very little. It depends on if we have something new going on at the dealership, weekly, or every day. Once we get a majority of those votes in, we're going to close the poll, share the results, and then we will all know what's happening at everyone else's dealerships. All right, votes are coming in now. Thank you so much. While we're waiting for those votes to come in, oh my goodness. Mel wrote in, and he said David, who, David was the one who wrote in about the guys who know everything in the auto industry, who've been in for a while, the problem people, I guess you could call them. Mel wrote in, David, play some examples of their phone calls or show an example of their emails or texts from your CRM while you're in class. Show what the baseline behavior is. When everyone knows their process is open to inspection by everyone, they have a hard time hiding behind the idea that they know it all. David wrote back in, bam, I love that idea.
Yeah, and that is the key to that. Who sent that in?
Mel.
Okay, Mel. And to Mel's point, the key, David, is, and I hope you grabbed what Mel said in that, is that if that becomes part of your follow-up and part of your measurement and discussion, so if you have your whole team, and then it becomes, that's the way we do it, meaning that every time we have a meeting, we're randomly going to, so for instance, you're working on CRM and emails and whatever, and make sure we're doing our tasks. Well, we're going to pull up the CRM, we're going to show it on the screen, and we're randomly just going to go around, and we're going to pick 3 people today, and we're going to go look at Susan's, and we're going to open up 3 leads, and we as a group are going to say, group, what do you think? Good, bad, and different. So you can also use the group to help do some of your training. As long as it's consistent, meaning you're doing everybody, then yes, pulling that person, eventually we're going to get to the old timers, and the group is going to help you move them, or you'll start a discussion as why. And then a lot of times that concept of, well, that's the way I've always done it, your team actually will help you move and change their behavior more than you do it. And again, make sure you're doing it to everybody, or that's just common practice, or else they're going to take it like you're picking on them, and then you lose your advantage as a trainer. They just think that you're just being, you're just picking on them.
Yes. Because when reason doesn't work, humiliation will.
Now again, and it's not humiliation. It's just opening it up to consistent behavior. Is that here's what we expect, and as I said, as we go through this, that's part of what it is. Here's what we expect. Here's what we see. What adjustments do we have to make? Now, the more that everybody understands what we're looking for, whether they agree with it or disagree, if you're constantly saying this is where we're moving towards, we may not all be there yet, but that's where we're moving.
Gotcha.
And here's what it is, and if you get the team helping to solve the problems, then all of a sudden you start getting advocates on your side from the team that they're a part of, and then actually out on the sales floor after the session, maybe some of those people go up to this person and say, why are you being such a hard ass, and why aren't you listening, or why aren't you applying what we should be doing? You're hurting the team.
Susan absolutely agrees with you. She says, inspect what we expect. Nice. Yes. All right, well, let's close out this poll question because it's been up here a while, all right? Let's close this out. Audience, thank you so much, everyone, for voting. So the question was, how often do you currently receive training in a month? 4% of today's audience said none, and an additional 4% said very, very little. So there you go. That's 8% of today's audience. Now, the majority, 35%, said it depends on if we have a new initiative at the dealership. Another 35% said weekly, and 22% of our audience says every day.
That's fantastic.
Glenn, does that help you out?
Yeah, because as you see, let me get back here to...
What are you doing?
So what that shows me is that there is an investment in training out there, which is what I see. What I'm saying is that I'm wondering what the point of this is how can we make that training more effective? Because as you see, only 8%, so rounded up, say 10% of our audience says I'm very little training, meaning my dealership or whatever doesn't really, or you personally, I don't get a lot of training. Sometimes in dealerships, depending on your position, a lot of it is focused, again, on the front-facing people. So you're going to get salespeople, BDC people, service advisors. They're going to get the bulk of the training, and maybe managers or the trainers of the trainers don't get a lot of training. But really, that's what the key is. So there is training going on. The key is now, by the time this is done, hopefully you'll be able to either look at your training that you deliver or the training that you receive and say, how can we make this a little bit better? So thank you for your answer. So here's how we're going to dive into this. Here's how training has to change in my mind. It's the reverse of the problems, but we're going to go through this. How to prepare correctly. So how do I prepare? Not just telling you prepare correctly. How do you get the right trainer, both internally and from outside? Get everyone involved, implementation, consistency, follow-up, which, again, I think that's the key. To Susan's point earlier on, when we call it follow-up accountability, that is the key to successful training. You can never stop following up. The minute you stop following up is the minute that people don't think whatever you're doing is important. Doesn't mean you have to follow up the same way all the time, but there is a point where you say, I can't go any further out, meaning maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks. But too far away, people lose focus. Measurement, and as I said, a long-term training process. So let's dive right in. How do we prepare? So, in preparation, the first question you have to ask yourself is, why are we doing this? Why are we changing anything? Why are we having this training? So again, could be training, we're installing a new process. It could be training to utilize a tool better, one of your, your CRM, or, we're going to train on our phone scripts. The question is why? Like, what do we want to get out of this? What behavior are you expecting to change? The more specific that you can get, the easier it is. If you're a trainer, Tim, who said he was a trainer and he wanted to get it to stick, the more that you're very clear yourself on what behavior you want to change. And again, I'm a real hard ass on this in terms of when I coach and train and I come in to train trainers, and people bring me in a lot to train their trainers because I can get them to do what I need them to do, and they're very successful because I teach them this. How to be specific. If you physically can't get up and do what I'm telling you to do, then it's not specific. Now you may think, well, what does that mean? So for instance, Jason's doing CRM. Just don't tell people, well, I need you to write a better email. Show them how to write a better email. What are the steps? Sometimes sales trainers will go in there and say things again, well, we're going to train you because, man, we just want to have a more motivated sales staff. Well, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. No one does. So again, what behavior? We want better customer service. What does that mean? What behaviors? What are we trying to change here? And then, what's the expected outcome? So again, are we trying to increase sales? Well, again, what's the number? Not just we want more sales, because to a salesperson, hey, I got one more sale, but you were expecting 5. The dealership is at 100, and you want, with this training, to be at 125, but they go, hey, we sold 101, we're better. There's a disconnect. So you have to be very, very clear. Number 2, is your team aware? So again, to my trainers, when you're preparing, does the team know you're even coming? Does the team know anything about the training, meaning what you're going to talk about, how long it's going to be? This is a key. Also, when you're doing training, notice when we talked earlier, and I said in the next 45 minutes to an hour, or whatever Eliana lets me have, but that gives you a framework. How many times have you sat in a training, and people are up there and they're talking, and you're half thinking or looking at your watch going, how long is this going to be? How much longer is this going to take? I got other things to do. Now I'm not listening to the trainer. But if the trainer says, listen, we're going to be here for an hour, and we're going to accomplish this, 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 and this, you go, okay. And now you mentally are checking things off. You know you're almost ready, you're focused, and then you're done in an hour. So again, make sure your team is aware when the training is, what the training is going to be about, why they're having it, what you expect to change, what's the out. The more that they're clear, the more they'll be receptive to your training. One of my tips also is do the end first, meaning that a lot of times you'll come into a training session, at the end of it they'll say, here's your checklist, here's your checklist. So when I'm physically training somebody face-to-face, now like this one, you'll get the deck, you'll get the recording. But what I do sometimes when I'm training a group face-to-face is I give them everything ahead of time. I either send it to them ahead of time, or I give them a handout as they come in saying, here are the key takeaways. So they start reading it before I even start. So they're sort of familiar, but they sort of know what I'm talking about, and maybe they'll make a note saying, I don't understand this, let me ask about this. You get your team involved. So again, they're getting prepared to receive your information. And then the last one, with your trainer. If you're the trainer, sort of skip this step. But if you're bringing someone in to your team, or a manager's bringing someone in, have they interviewed the trainer to discuss how they train? What do I tell my team to answer all these questions? Sometimes the trainer will not do this. It is up to you who are bringing this person in to get this information. How long is your training going to be? How do you teach? What do you need? What should the team be prepared for? How are you going to implement this? Anything that you can do ahead of time to make sure that your team is aware to receive the training you want, it will be more effective. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Any thoughts?
Oh, audience, if you have any questions or thoughts, you can always write them in, but I know we have to really get moving on this because we're running out of time already.
Go ahead. Poll question.
Okay, poll question. Audience, this is your second of 3 poll questions. It's on the screen now. We'd love to see what you have to say. The question is, over the last year, how would you rate the trainers that have been brought into your dealership? Please select one of the following answers. Would you rate them as excellent, some good, some bad, comme ci, comme ça, fair, poor, or what trainers are you talking about? All right. Over the last year, how would you rate the trainers that have been brought into your dealership? Excellent, some good, some bad, fair to middling, poor, or what trainers are you speaking of? Once we get a majority of the votes in, we're going to close the poll, share the results, and like I said, if you're tweeting out, hey, don't forget to tag me in it, at Eliana Radji. You can also tag at Glenn Pasch in there as well. And any questions that you want to address to Glenn, hey, send them to me. I'd love to hold on to those. We're going to have a great Q&A session at the end of his presentation. All right, votes are still coming in. Glenn, isn't it true that some dealers don't actually bring in outside trainers? Some dealers do their own training, right?
Right, and some do, but again, if someone, this is where the involvement of the managers come. If I'm a general manager and I said, Eliana, I want you to retrain your team, or hey, we have this, we have a CRM, I need you to train the team on this. It is up to the trainer to have that discussion with the general manager. Again, what should I be doing? How long do I have? What do you expect out of this training? The more that, again, your managers who are above you are empowering you to train, have that discussion, or even yourself, interview yourself so again, making sure that you can communicate that out to your team. But sometimes people will just get pulled in because they're quote-unquote the smart kids in the room, go train. That doesn't necessarily make them a good trainer. It just means that they have some knowledge.
Gotcha. All right, well, we already have a majority of the votes in, so why don't we close this poll, see what the audience had to say today, right?
Some good, some bad. Fair.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so 11% of today's audience said, hey, the trainers that we've been having are excellent. But it was only 11% of today's audience. The majority, 63% of today's audience, say some good, some bad. Now, 16%, they would rate their trainers as fair. And the remaining 11% of today's audience said, LOL, what trainers? Glenn, does that help you out?
It does. Well, it sort of matches up with the 8 to 10% who said that they don't really get a lot of training. And again, so to your point of some good, some bad, when you're thinking about your trainers that you have come in for you guys, when you're thinking of trainers, or if you are a trainer or you see a trainer, think to yourself, take a moment and take a piece of paper and say, all the people who are excellent, or the 63% that said some were good, some were bad, well, what were the good ones? What did they do? What did the bad ones do? So again, then, if you're ever put in a position to train, mimic the list of the good things. If try never to do anything that bothered you. I always say if it bugs you, it probably will bug your team. We're all pretty normal. So if you see a trainer wasn't prepared, or a trainer didn't ask questions, or a trainer just talked down to me, or really just their information was not specific enough, well, those are all things then that you should remember for yourself to say, if I'm ever a trainer, or if I am a trainer, I need to make sure that my information is specific, that I talk to the people, not talk down to the people. And again, that moves into what makes a good trainer. So if you are a trainer yourself, or you want to be a trainer, or if you're interviewing a trainer, these are the things that I always look for. Well, most trainers have to be confident, but there's a difference between confidence and arrogance. Arrogance can come across as, hey, and I've heard trainers say this, and it blows my mind, but they'll say, Mr. Dealer, hey, you brought me in, you don't know what you're doing, so just, leave me alone and let me do what I do. Like, a trainer to me is this person who is a coach. And I always talk in terms of training as coaching, and I think the best coaches and trainers in the automotive industry, if you think of it like a sports team, they're constantly out there working with their team. They have good communication skills, both written and oral, very specific. They're clear on what they want. They're clear on their expectations. They're patient. Change doesn't happen over time. They're patient. Let me retrain you. Let me work you through again. Let me try and re-explain it. Let me try a different angle. They're trying to move the team forward. It isn't just well, I showed you one time, you should know it, which I do hear. And if this ever comes out of your mouth, or you hear it come out of a trainer's mouth, it should be a real big, red flag. But, sometimes they'll say, well, that person's a salesperson. They've sold cars before at another dealership. They know what to do. No, they need to understand. You need to train them on how to do it for your dealership. Or if a BDC person, or whatever position, sometimes you get people coming in who have worked in the industry. That's fine, bring their skills, but let me show you. Take the time and invest the time to show them how to do it correctly for your dealership. So, the one that I talked about earlier, the number one thing, which was involvement. So what does involvement mean? Part of the things to check is everyone attending. So if you're doing, again, I'm going to go back to Jason. He had a CRM training, or technical training, and he has to go train a team at one of the stores. Well, is everyone there? But if someone's not there, who's training them? Is there a rescheduled day that Jason comes back, or are they relying on somebody at their dealership? Oh, don't worry, I'll train them. Well, I'm not sure that's the best. That becomes watered down training, the telephone game, because what that person or that trainer or that employee is going to do is they're going to tell them their version. They're going to take Jason's words, say, well, Jason told us this, but this is what I do to help me, so here, I'll show you my way. And then Jason comes back and goes, how are we doing this over here? So again, really be clear on who's coming to my training? Is everyone coming? If they're not, what do we do next? Is upper management there? Demand it. Demand that the person, because when you leave, if you're the trainer or a trainer comes in, well, once that trainer leaves, who's picking up the ball and running with this? And our next slide, when we talk about implementation and follow-up, well, somebody has to do that. And if they're not there to see what you're supposed to be doing, how can they follow up and hold people accountable? So upper management being there is important if you want this new initiative to really stick. Now, during the training, a couple tips, if you're trainers or you're part of training, is before trainees leave, before those people leave, ask them to explain each point. Go through the point. Just don't assume that they know what you're talking about. A lot of times they will just nod their heads and go, yeah, we got it, because they don't want to look foolish in front of their teammates and go, I'm sorry, I don't remember what you said. So put them on the spot. Again, go around to the room. Okay, what do we say point 1 is? What point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5? This way they explain it in their own words. Then you can clarify if anything is off before you sort of set them loose to actually do it. And one good tip is also to ask them, give me one point that we talked about, and how are you going to implement that? How are you going to take this training and go implement this? What this does is it gets those attendees starting to think about implementation, not just I have my sheets of paper, I'm going to go put them on my desk and I'll find them in 2 weeks and go, oh, I never really got around to that. So if I tell everybody, what are you going to do? What's the first thing you're going to do to implement? Pick one thing, not 10, one thing. What are you going to do? How are you going to implement this? What that also allows me, if I'm the trainer, the coach who's going to follow up, now I already have one thing I can go follow up on. It makes my life easier because that person said, so for instance, CRM, I'm going to make sure before I leave every day, every one of my tasks is completed. Okay, great, because we were implementing accountability or a new CRM process. So then you as a trainer at the end of the day say, okay, before you leave, come check out with me, and we're going to make sure that you did what you said you were going to do. If they did, congratulate them. If they didn't, let's figure out why, and then let's make adjustments. So again, this is the way we can start to slowly allow the people who were in attendance help to take this training and implement it. So as I said, how to implement this? Ask your trainees for the first action item. What are they going to do? Here's all my information. I gave you 10 things. Pick one. What's the first thing you're going to do when you leave here? The second thing to make your training stick, get the bang for your investment, is who's going to implement this? Because sometimes I go in, I'm a trainer, but I'm leaving. So who's going to take this training? Who's responsible? Because I, as a trainer, need to know that to make sure I can coach and train them before I leave on how they're going to implement that. I got to sit down and say, what's your implementation plan? Here's all this new information. Everybody's happy, high-fiving, great workshop, Glenn, love this information. Okay, just like we talked about earlier, watching the videos, who's responsible to implement that new skill into their day-to-day? So you need to understand that. The next thing is, does this affect other departments? A lot of times, new initiatives, no one thinks about that. Meaning we have a new marketing initiative, let's say, and we're going to increase our spend on paid advertisements because we want the phones ringing more, and we want more lead forms going on, and we want all of that to happen. But did anyone alert? So let's say you have a BDC. Did anyone alert the BDC and say, hey, you're going to get hit with 20% more leads over the next few days because we just amped up this spend? No. All of a sudden, leads are coming in, they're not prepared, then that goes into the whole thing that happens with BDC. They cherry pick, we're not being efficient, we're not hitting our metrics because no one went over there and said, hey, we're thinking of upping this marketing. I know it's going to affect your department. Are you prepared to handle this? I don't know. I think I better, I have to change schedules, or I might have to hire somebody. Okay, well, it's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. Oh, see, that's communication. Now we get ROI. Now we get ROI. My new initiative of training, again, I may become more efficient with my CRM process, which means I have more people coming in, which means, hey, I need more demos. Hey, people who are stocking my demos here, I need more demos. So again, sometimes your training and the results you want from your training impact another department, so you have to talk about them. And then also from implementation, what documentation? Just coming into a training, did you provide them with training documents, process documents, also documentation on how it's going to be implemented? Did you as a trainer, or did you receive from the trainer all of this? Because again, our memories are very faulty. And number two is if I'm teaching a room of 15 people and I'm going to trust their notes, well, they're going to write down what makes sense to them, not what makes sense to me as the trainer leading this initiative. And then that's where 2 weeks down the road we have confusion. We don't think the initiative worked because, again, it goes back to that preparation. If I handed everybody the sheets, here's what we're doing, here's how it is, take your notes based off of my structure, here's how we're going to implement, we have a better chance of being successful. So now we're moving on through this. So we've implemented this, and now people are out. So we've done our preparation, we've done a great job training them, we've talked about how it's going to be implemented, we've got our action items from our team, we've given them documents, and we're really moving along. Now back to Susan's point, accountability. It usually drifts off. Starts off good. I'll guarantee you every single one of you guys have had a new initiative in your dealership, and for the first week everyone is pumped up. And we're knocking it out of the ballpark. Everybody's talking about it. It's on the forefront of everyone's mind until the next initiative or the next shiny object.
Well, that's true.
Right, and then we're all excited about that one over there. But what happens to the 2 or 3 that we did before? Just because they're not the new initiative doesn't mean that they're not important. So, in terms of follow-up, goes back to who's supposed to be following up? Who's coaching this team? Who's following up on those new behaviors, new things, new metrics? So again, you have to decide on how often are we following up and on what metrics. So again, we have to be clear, go back to the clarity. This behavior, we're looking for these results. Okay, so those are the metrics we're looking for, both as a group or individually. Well, how often do I follow up? So to Susan's point, it all depends, Susan, on the individual. Meaning that I should be following up. If my process is, if I train you today on something, I'm coming back within an hour or two to check in on you, and then an hour or two more. I'm only going to loosen up the time that I check back with you based on what I find. If I come back and follow up and you're doing what I need you to do and you're doing a good job and you feel comfortable with it, great. Follow. Maybe then I come instead of every couple hours, maybe it's once a day or twice a day, and then it's once a day, then it's once every other day or twice a week, once a week. I never stop on most initiatives with my team at least once every 2 weeks. I usually don't go past 2 weeks because what happens is if I go too far, then it loses focus from the person doing it. It doesn't seem as important. If I go back to that person and all of a sudden I see them drifting, well, now I start retraining, right? That's my retraining process. I have a retraining process. If I'm not getting the results I want, I get back in and I recoach you, and then I start my follow-up process again, meaning that if I retrained you, maybe I just pull it back instead of every 2 weeks, I go back to 3 times a week and just keep you back on track. Because if I've trained you correctly, I can probably get you back on track pretty quickly. The key is following up. But you also have to explain the follow-up process to your people, because if you don't tell people that you're going to follow up, they're going to freak out if all of a sudden you're standing behind them watching them. Okay? If they're going to be like, why are you looking over my shoulder? Are you picking up? No. You just explain to them, here's how I coach, here's how I teach, this is what's going to happen over the next couple weeks. As we do this new initiative, I'm going to be coming up and asking you, how are you doing? Check on you, and maybe watch what you're doing depending on the new initiative, and then I'm going to follow up. The more that, again, you're clear as a coach, and if they see you as a coach, not as a boss, they see that you're there to help them improve, then follow-up is more effective. So in terms of your documentation, a couple things about what makes good documentation, because I've seen documentation that is, sometimes very thorough, but it's not useful. The key is it easy to understand and use? If no one's going to use the documentation, it could be great, but that's like writing a book that no one reads. Who cares? It's like user manuals. How many times do we get something, buy a product, and we throw the user manual in a drawer somewhere and never look at it? But again, if you're trying to retrain somebody, if it's a new phone script, is the phone script posted in their booth? If it's a new process, are you talking about it all the time? Is it easy for them to access? Is it on their desk? Is it on their clipboard? However it is. That's what I mean by easy to access. Is it around them? The key for any good documentation and this type of changes, again, it goes back to management. If you're not going to use it as a coach and a trainer or a manager, well, your team's not. So you could have all the beautiful reports you want, you could have all the great process documents, but if you don't talk about it, you don't use it, you don't refer to it, nobody's going to think it's important. So how do you use reports? People ask me when I'm following up, like, what should I use? How do I use them? Because they always say in dealerships we have so many reports, I don't know what metric I'm supposed to be doing, and how do I organize myself? At the end of the day, again, decide what you're measuring. So if it's a new initiative, if I'm working with an individual salesperson per se, and I'm working on their CRM process, well, what am I measuring? Am I measuring the fact that all of their tasks are done? Or am I measuring their compliance with the sales process? If it's BDC and they're using a new phone script, what am I measuring? Is it when I'm listening to them, are they using the script? Am I looking at the effectiveness of the script? Then I can create my reports or keep my notes to say this is what I'm measuring, here's how I'm going to use it. And again, then it allows me to be able to give effective feedback to them, because now I can talk about numbers. You were here. Here's what you did yesterday, here's what you've done for the last 2 weeks, here's what you've done for the last 3 months. That's better, that's not better. Here's what we're seeing. Then they also can see the reports. They know how to inspect themselves, because the more you can teach them about the reports you're using and the metrics you're using, they'll be able to self-police themselves. And really for you in coaching and training, again, using these reports, so when they hit their goals, being able to sit down with them and say, listen, folks, you hit your numbers, great job, because you did X, Y, and Z. You reinforce that new behavior. Remind them that the reason why we got our new results is because you've been complying with these changes that we implemented. We implemented them, we trained them, you're doing them, I'm following up, and look at the great results we got. So they can repeat that behavior. If they're missing the goals, you can take a step back and say, we trained, we implemented, I'm following up, you're doing these couple things, great job. Couple things here we're not doing as well as we were, let me go back and retrain. But again, you're using reports and numbers and specific behaviors, not personal things like, oh, they're just lazy, oh, they're just not putting in the effort. Again, broad brush training feedback doesn't help. They're doing something right. No one comes to work to try to fail. So if you're saying, well, they don't seem to be putting in the effort, well, what does that mean? Go inspect, go follow up, see what metrics they're succeeding at, what metrics they're not, then dive in and figure out what's going on. So again, then you can create these what I call actionable tasks, behaviors, to get them to be able to do it. Maybe there was a disconnect. Maybe there was a miscommunication. They thought they were supposed to do X, but you wanted them to do Y. So again, this is where you get in there using numbers, using reports effectively, and that's what's going to make your training stick. Okay? All of your effort goes back to the beginning. The more clear you can be on your expectation, the more that you can get in a training process, the more they understand what the process is going to be. They understand the follow-up process. They understand the expectation. They understand the numbers and the metrics you're looking at and what they mean and how their behaviors affect these numbers. The more you're going to be able to get your training to stick, and thus, for Ashton and everybody, you're going to be able to look at this and say, that investment on the training that time that we put in, or I brought that trainer in and it cost me X to bring that trainer in, but because then we took that training and implemented it and did X, Y, and Z, we increased by this. Then you can really say that trainer equals that. But again, it's just not a trainer. It's everything that happens in between, and that's what really makes training stick. So we have one more poll question, and then we'll start getting near to wind this up.
Yes. Okay. Well, we have our last poll question of the day on the screen for you now, audience. We want to know, what do you feel is the best way for you to learn? Yeah, you. We want to know. Please select one of the following answers. Do you feel you learn best when you read a how-to book or article? Do you think it's more effective when you listen to a recording? How about when you actually watch a video? What about on-the-job training? What about if you watch someone do it in front of you? All right? Or I don't need no learning. I already know everything. What do you feel is the best way for you to learn? Please select one of the following answers. Once we get a majority of those votes in, we're going to close the poll, share the results. We're running really late on time. So if you haven't gotten your questions in yet for Glenn for our Q&A session, now would be a great time to do so. By the way, I want to let you know, Glenn, Susan did write in a few moments ago, and she says, excellent. Thank you, Glenn. So she likes what you're saying, all right?
Oh, well, thank you, Susan.
She's not alone. Actually, a gentleman named Jason wrote in, and he says, this is all pretty spot on. So he likes what you're saying, too. And I love that you guys are writing into me. Thank you so much. Votes are still coming in. Audience, you rock. A couple more seconds, and then we'll close out that poll. And I don't think you're going to have any surprises here with this last poll question.
Well, I think I'll explain the reason why I asked this, but again, I appreciate the feedback. Again, I train very straightforward. It isn't anything. I don't think success for training is anything where it's like, oh my gosh, this is something miraculous. It takes hard work. It takes hard work, it takes consistency, and it takes commitment. And that's really, as I said earlier on, that's why I think a lot of training fails, is because it's the involvement, just involvement of management, involvement of the team, involvement of the trainer, beyond the buzz and the newness of it. Once it gets past that newness, that's where real success comes, is that it becomes part of your everyday, and
right.
we don't stop looking at it.
Right.
So, okay, let's look at this. Great.
Let's look at this. All right, so 11% of today's audience said they learn best when they read a how-to. Only 5% said listening to a recording does it for them. 21% say they like to watch videos, but the majority, 63%, well, they all agree, watching someone do it in front of me is the way they learn best. And, of course, my smart audience, no one picked I don't need no learning. But we did have David who wrote in, and he said, I know you probably ran out of room on the slide, but you didn't have Attend to DealerOn webinar as an option. David, thank you so much for the plug. I appreciate it. But Glenn, 63% said that they like on-the-job training.
Okay, so here's the reason why I asked this question was, as a trainer, you have to understand that people all don't learn the same way. And so as a trainer, you have to understand that some people need you to go in more depth. Some people can get it just by you saying, here, just read the process, and some people will just say, just give me the process, I'll read it and go. We had 11% of the people who basically say, I don't need you to tell me, just let me read it, I'll figure it out myself, and I'll do it. There are going to be people on your team that way. Some people would rather watch a video or listen to something. Other people want to see it being done. So seeing that 63% of you guys like watching someone do it, that's an important thing for you to understand, is that most people, it's easier for you to see someone do it. So for you, if you're training somebody, so I'm going to go back to Jason again, doing the CRM. So if you're telling somebody how to write an email or how to set up a process, and I'm going to set up reminders, just don't tell them. Say, here, let me sit next to me and watch me do it. Then flip it and say, let me watch you do it. and role play that way. Or if you're reading the script, watch me do it. Or if I'm going to teach a salesperson, come up with me, stand on a hip. We've all seen it in restaurants where the person is standing behind somebody, you know somebody's training. Doesn't matter, same thing there. Watch me, I'm going to go greet a customer. Watch how I greet the customer. Then it's, well, now I'm going to watch you. So the reason I did that is for you to understand, you guys learn a certain way. There's a lot of different ways people learn. You have to, the best trainers understand that and use all sorts of mediums to train people. So for you guys out there, there's a lot of things. There are so many great books, videos, webinars, again, learning platforms. You know, there's a lot of learning platforms. As I said, PCG, a lot of people have been asking us to put our training online, and we're doing that. We're offering, 3 lucky winners are going to get 2 free classes. I'm putting together a management course like this. I'm putting it on the web, creating it. So to go through a lot of these things, different modules. So, you're a new manager, even if you are a manager, what happens when my team gets results, which I do, and go through these different modules and give you the tools to make yourself a better manager. There's still great things, live events, conferences. The key to conferences, and again, live events, be prepared yourself. If you're going to a large conference like Digital Dealers coming up or Driving Sales is coming up and some of the other ones, if you're going to a large conference like that, ahead of time prepare. What am I going to see? What am I trying to get out of this? Have some questions for the trainers. Get your answers, get your questions answered before you leave. Because as a trainer and people who do workshops, I love when people come up afterwards and will ask me questions, but there's so much information, it can be overwhelming. Go out there and really focus and try to take care of one thing at a time. Don't try to do 20 different things. I'm going to work on this month. I'm going to work on this month to help you get better. So as I said, a couple suggested resources. Patrick Lencioni, any of his books, they're great. Easy to read. They're stories more than they are like to do this, do this, do this. He sets all of his training in a story of someone going through or a business going through these type of changes. Great. The book I was talking to earlier, it's an older book, but it's one of the best books I've ever read. It's why don't employees do what they're supposed to do and what you can do. It was a long title. But the gentleman's name is Ferdinand Fornes, and it's a great book. And he talks about, to the gentleman's question earlier about, I have people who aren't buying into my training, what do I do? Well, you have 2 choices. You can be a manager and tell them, listen, I'm the manager, you do it because I tell you. That's not effective. You have to sell them on what's in it for them, how it's going to help them be better. My blog, I write pretty much every week. You can find and I write about a variety of things, but a lot of it is training, learning, things of that nature. And as I said, PCGtraining.com, you can learn about all of our classes that are there currently. As Eliana said, we're a little different than some of the other platforms because these are really how to do them. So we're going to show you through screen capture. If it's Google Analytics, we're going to show you how to do what we're telling you to do. We're just not going to tell you. Same thing when fundamentals of digital marketing. Here we're going to show you when we're talking about this, and we'll go live and capture it on screen. So as Eliana said, because she saw them, very, very hands-on. So take a look at that. And so to wrap up, a couple key takeaways. Commit to training like it's a sports team. Think of it this way. If you're running a team or your manager's running a team, if you turned on TV to your favorite sports team and the head coach was not there, they're in the back locker room just drinking coffee, they're not there while the game's being played, you would probably call for them to be fired. You'd flip out. What's going on is crazy. But yet, I see on sales floors, the general sales manager, they're in the back office in the back of the room, or they're at the desk, and they're not really out there watching what's going on. Sometimes it's not their fault. They have a lot on their desk, but I've seen it in BDCs. The manager's not there listening to calls, not inspecting, not coaching, not making them better. So again, if you're going to put any initiative in, if you're going to invest time, if you're going to bring a trainer in, invest money, you have to commit. Like, this is a game changer. We have to get in there and we have to implement. Review all of your training documents for your team. Again, are they usable? Are they simple to learn? Can we take this 10-page report and make it into a one sheet with bullet points that the team can carry around on their clipboard? Create an interview questionnaire for your new trainers coming in, even trainers internally. Are they prepared? How long is the training going to be? What are you going to accomplish? What are the takeaways? What's going to happen after your training? How involved are you going to be? Create an action plan for your upcoming training. As I said, who's going to attend the training? If somebody's not going to be there, how do we get them trained? Who's going to do it? What's going to be accomplished? What happens next? What's the long-term follow-up? What's the process? What's the metrics? All of these things you need to prepare, and the more clear that you can be and have this documented like a checklist, the more successful your training is going to be, the more it's going to stick because everybody knows where they started, what changed, what they're supposed to do, what's the metric, and then eventually what's the end goal. So always teach your team, watch what's going on, measure what they're doing, make adjustments, and then just keep repeating. Teach them again. So after I adjust, teach the adjustment. Then watch, did they make the adjustment? Let's measure again, adjust, repeat. And just demand excellence. Demand that everybody commits to this. Demand more from yourself. Demand more from your team. Or else what happens is all that money is going to be wasted, and eventually ownership management's going to say, you know what, all this training we invest in doesn't do anything, so we're not going to do any training, and that would be a shame. So I hope you got a lot out of this. Like I said, two things. We're going to have question and answer. But second to that is, please feel free. I say this to everybody, and some people take me up on it. I will make myself available to anybody on this webinar to talk about your personal situation, meaning what's going on. If I can help you in any way, call me up. There's no charge. There's nothing like that. I will make myself available. You want to pick my brain? Here's my situation. What do I do? How do I do this? What can I do? Would you look at my document? Would you look at my process? You have my email address, glenn@pcgmailer.com. Feel free to let me help you.
Well said. Thank you, Glenn. And audience, if you haven't gotten in your question yet for the Glenn Pasch, I don't know what you're waiting for. Now's the perfect time. And just like he said, we're here to help. He's here to help. So if you have a specific question about how to get your training to stick, let's try and help you out right now. So send in those questions. Before we get to that, though, hey, Glenn, how you doing? Looking
I'm
good.
How are you?
Looking pretty fly over there. Okay. We have some fun stuff to do right now. It's that time. So if you missed it at the beginning of the webinar, well, I announced that our good friends at PCG Consulting, they are giving away one heck of a prize today. 3 of you lucky webinar attendees are going to win free access for 90 days to 2 of PCG's valuable online courses. Now, I know this sounds like it's only one thing, but it's actually not. There's I don't know, 30 different modules or something like that inside each of these courses. And they're all really bite-sized. So some of them are 4 minutes, some of them are 9 minutes, some of them are 11 minutes. They're all different sizes, all different portions of that topic. Great, great stuff. I took a look at it myself and I was very, very impressed. Actually, one of our attendees, David, writes in, he says, I'm going through the Google Analytics training on PCG training right now, and it is awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, David.
But today, we're giving away 3 attendees are going to win access to 2 of those modules for 90 days. And the 2 are Fundamentals of Digital Marketing and Web Presence Management. So as I said before, high levels of hands-on, step-by-step training awesomeness. It's awesome. You definitely want to win this. So stick around. Hopefully, you can answer one of these simple questions about the presentation that you just saw. So get ready, get to your keyboards. First one to write in a correct response is going to be walking away with one of these cool prizes today. Good luck, everyone. Of course, vendors, you know we love you, but we're going to ask you to sit this one out. This prize is intended for dealership personnel only. All right, audience, here we go. And good luck, everyone. These questions are not that easy, but here we go. Okay, question number 1. What is the number 1 reason that most training fails? What is the number 1 reason that most training fails? Let's see. Let's see. People are writing in. Oh, We have a winner. I'm so excited. Ooh, they wrote it just like you wrote it. Okay. Ed Nimnicht. Oh my gosh, I don't know. I probably butchered your last name, but Ed, you wrote in lack of involvement, and that is correct. Right, Glenn? It's lack of involvement from management or lack of management, correct?
Yes, lack of involvement. A lot of I see it from management, but again, it is lack of involvement from your team, from your management, from everyone. But so good job, Ed.
All right, Ed, I'm writing down your name. Okay, there we go. Ed, you're going to be hearing from our good friends over at PCG. And you know what, Ed? Oh, he said, you said it right. Oh, thank you, Ed. I'm afraid to say it again because I thought I had it wrong the first time. But you know what, Ed? You're already a winner today, my friend. So you can sit this next one, couple of questions out and relax. All right, everyone else, here you go. Another chance to win this really cool prize. Here's your question. Good luck, everyone. What is the biggest thing that will help training stick? What is the biggest thing that will help your training stick? What's that number one thing? That's right, Kevin Jones. Follow up. Thank you so much. You were the very first person to write in that correct response. Kevin Jones, writing down your name right now. You are a winner, my friend. Congratulations. All right, we have one last chance for you guys to win this very cool prize. Good luck, everyone. Here is your question. How much money did Glenn say is spent on corporate employee training? How much money did Glenn say is spent on corporate employee training? Let me scroll up here. Oh my goodness, so many people answered. Jason McIntyre, you are the first person to write in the correct response of 70 billion. That is correct. Jason McIntyre with the win. Jason McIntyre.
You know what I'm going to do right now, Eliana? Everybody who's listening, I'll throw another one out. I'm going to give you a question. Whoever answers it correctly will also win the prize. What? I said it earlier on. Today is the celebration. It's National What Day?
David Sharp with the win. Left-handed day. It's so funny because when you said it, he wrote in, he's like, that's awesome. I'm left-handed. So he, of course, was the first one with the win. Dave Sharp.
Nice.
Congratulations. All right. So for all of you winners, M. Nimnicht, Kevin Jones, Jason McIntyre, and David Sharp, congratulations on winning this super cool prize. Of course, we got to thank our good friends at Pasch Consulting Group for their incredible generosity. Thank you for throwing that fourth one in, Glenn. And for all of you other attendees, thank you so much for playing along. But guess what? We give away cool prizes every week, so try us back at another DealerOn webinar. You never know when it might be your lucky day to win an awesome prize. All right, audience, thank you so much. Very, very cool. Let's get to some of those questions. We don't have a lot of them, but the ones that we have are pretty awesome. Okay, ready, Glenn? Oh, you know what? You can fast forward over to that cool slide with your picture on it. There we go. Yeah, there you go. It's not big. All of your contact information's on there, so that's kind of important. All right. First question. Ashton wrote this in a while ago. Ashton says, will you be providing specific metrics that we can use? That brings me to my question, because this was my question. When you say how to make it stick, you know, and let's say you do all that measurement and stuff, of course, if it was 100% effective, then we would say, hey, that training really stuck. But what is an acceptable amount of success with training? Does it always have to be 100%? If it's not 100%, then it wasn't successful?
No. Again, it's more about what's the end result. A lot of times, and in this type of, in dealerships, a lot of times they bring in sales trainers, they bring in BDC trainers, and they want to see, you know, did our group get better? So did our team get better? So if, you know, if even on an individual, for me, it's always looking to see, are they making the change? Are they making an effort to apply this new knowledge? So if it's a new skill set, a new way to use a script, is it a new way that they're using the CRM? Nothing's ever going to be 100%, meaning the whole team's going to be perfect. But again, it's going to be measuring everybody's own effectiveness. Maybe, you know, Eliana, if you do this process, your performance is going to increase 25%. Somebody else's might be 10%. Somebody might 50%. But really, you should be trying to get to 100% compliance of this behavior. If it's a new script, well, we all should be using this script. If it's this is the way we greet our customers, well, then everybody should be greeting the customer. So we should be looking at that. Again, there are some times where you as an individual, somebody may tweak something because that's their individual style, but again, it depends on what the metric is or what you're trying to fix. If it's the way to fill out a form and this is the way it has to be filled out, well then 100% compliance is 100% compliance. If it's a greeting, are we saying this, this, and this first? Well, I say all three things, I might put it in a different order, but I'm hitting all the buttons. That might be acceptable. So again, what I'm talking about with metrics is if I'm saying that this new sales process, we expect to increase our monthly sales by 20%, well then did we hit 20%?
There you go. All right, Ashton, thank you so much for the great question. Now, Susan, you know, we've been having a little dialogue with Susan all day today because she had some very insightful thoughts. Susan says, I feel trainers should lead by example, and I don't find that many of them do that today. If they're doing phone training, for instance, then the trainer should pick up the phone and lead by example. On-the-job training, not so much classroom. She also wanted me to tell you, thank you both so much for this great training today. I'll be sending Glenn an email, and I can't wait for the next informative video. So that's all from Susan.
Right. Well, okay. So to your point, Susan, I agree. I'm a big fan of when I come into a dealership to train, if someone brings me in, I do very little classroom training. If I'm there for 2 days, I'll get everyone in a room for maybe 45 minutes and an hour max to do that preparation. You know, whatever I sent. So if I sent things ahead of time, well, did the team get them? You know, did they get all the handouts? Did they understand what we're going to do? So I set my expectations. Here's how I train. Here's how it's going to be. So I set that, and then let's get out onto the floor. Now, sometimes it might be, again, going through some of the new scripting. So, for instance, to your point of a phone trainer, if I was coming in to do phone training, I would go over the current results. Let's all understand what the current process is. I'd interview the team and say, where do you guys feel successful? Where do you feel you're struggling? You know, they're bringing me in because they feel this. What's your feeling? So I want to start getting that dialogue going. But eventually, to your point, I got to get out there because most people in dealerships have a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to say to the trainer, well, why should I listen to you unless you either did my job or can show me that you did my job? There is that type of thing. So to your point, absolutely. As I said earlier to someone, I would demonstrate, because we learned that most of you like to watch someone do it. So absolutely, let me get on the phone and I'm going to show you how to use a script, and you listen to me, and then maybe we role play, then I watch you. So I agree. The best trainers get you out of the classroom, because then it's just theory, and that was the point of this webinar, was the fact that most trainers come in, they sit you in a classroom and you talk about theory, but then they're not there when you get back on the phones. They're not helping you implement this, and that's really the key to success.
Agreed. Susan, thank you so much for everything today. I do appreciate it. I do want to get to this question posed by Ashton. He wrote, most of my managers are focused on one thing and one thing only, and that is what's in front of them, the deal. How can I change these habits? And that's another question that I have as well. When you have training going on, well, the dealership is still running as well. So at what point do people say, oh, I got to go, I got somebody who, you know, just showed up, I got to leave, and do that deal instead of having people who are just concentrating on the training? And how often do you do the training? And how long should it be? And should it be every day? I got lots of questions over here, Glenn.
Okay, so let's knock a few of these out. To his first, how can I change the behavior of managers? Again, this is where you as a trainer go in and talk to, even if it's an internal training. So if they say to you, Ashton, I want you to go do this training, well, then you got to go back to them and say, okay, are you going to be here? Well, no. So you're saying to your general manager or GSM or whoever's above you, you say, are you going to be part of this training? No, I can't be part of the training because I got to do X, Y, and Z. Okay. well then can I have time with you today to go over what I'm going to teach, what the results were in the teaching, and then what the plan is afterwards. So again, you got to, if you're going to change the behavior, you got to sort of force yourself on them to say, hey, I need your involvement. I need you to understand what's going on. Again, it depends on the pecking order. If that person is going to deal with the team or not, you know, they may just need to be filled in. If they're going to be actively part of it, so if you're a trainer brought in and the person who runs that team day to day is not part of it, you got to either say to that person, listen, you got to table all this stuff and you got to be here. You know, you need to be here for an hour. That's what all it's going to be. I'm sure the place isn't going to burn down. You know, if you have to Eliana, your point, well, what happens if people get pulled out? Same thing. If it's important, well, then let's do it before the dealership opens up. If the dealership opens up at 9 or 10, then you say, listen, everybody's here at 8. Or you separate it out into teams and you say, great, I'm going to take this group from 9 to 10, this group from 11 to 12, this group from 2 to 3. You might have to do the training 2 or 3 times in a day, which allows people to cover, because again, depends. A lot of it also depends on the state of the dealership. If it's an open floor where everybody feels like if I'm sitting in this dealership, then I'm going to lose ups. This is the conversation of being prepared to say, what's the best day for this training? Maybe Tuesday morning in a dealership is better. Maybe Saturday afternoon. Maybe a day late in the day, early in the morning. So that's where a lot of this comes. But you have to be prepared to understand that people may want to get pulled out, and you have to block it. You have to say, listen, they can't leave. They cannot leave to do this. You know, is it again, if somebody leaves for some reason, but then you have to say, okay, then you as a trainer have to go find that person and say, when can I have an hour of your time so that we can work one-on-one to make sure that you're trained?
Agreed. And thank you so much, Glenn. We are very much over time. We are going to have to let you go. And audience, thank you so much for sticking it out with us today. You hung in there with us for an hour and a half of automotive awesomeness from the one and only Glenn Pasch, and we do appreciate you. Glenn, thank you so much. Don't make it be so long before we webinar again together, sir.
No problem. And hold on, I think you wanted to just remind people about the...
Yes, I do. At the conclusion of this webinar, in just a moment, you're going to receive a short survey. So please fill it out. We're always looking for great feedback from our audience. We're going to randomly select a couple of people from all those completed surveys to also win some Google prizes. And, oh, by the way, I wanted to let you know I am going to be emceeing at the upcoming Women in Automotive Conference. It's the first of its kind. The event is next week. Are you going to be in Orlando, Florida between August 18th and the 20th? Well, if you are, then come out and see me. We're going to be focusing on aiding and empowering the women in our industry to improve their skills, advance their careers, and find the highest level of success in a male-dominated industry. If you're going to be in Orlando, well, then I hope to see you there. And to find out more about the conference, please visit womeninautomotive.com. And by the way, invitations are going out tomorrow for our next webinar. Boom! 5 surefire strategies to make more money selling cars. Are you serious about selling more cars and making more money? We know you are, and we called in some big guns to help you out. Join auto industry progressive retailing expert Corey Mosley for an eye-opening 1-hour webinar where he's going to share 5 surefire strategies to make more money selling cars. This webinar is tailor-made for showroom sales, internet sales, and BDC professionals who are ready to get more control of their sales results and their income. You want to become a dealership rock star with cutting-edge strategies, increased sales, and all-around automotive awesomeness? Then don't miss this opportunity to make a tremendous difference to you and your bottom line. If you think you have what it takes to master the 5 surefire strategies to make more money selling cars, then this is a presentation you just can't afford to miss. Don't forget, DealerOn's weekly webinars are held Thursdays, 12 noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, and 9 a.m. Pacific. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions regarding these webinars and our topics, feel free to contact me directly. Again, my name is Eliana Raggio. I love hearing from you, so track me down online, Facebook, Twitter, Google+, all the automotive social networks, or email me directly at eliana@dealeron.com. Thank you all so very much for spending this time with us today, and I hope to see you all on another webinar in DealerOn's continuing education series. Take care.